There's a new bill, a bipartisan one, a Senate bill called the Crypto Asset National Security Enforcement Act of 2023 that wants to regulate DeFi like banks. The bill wants to place stringent AML requirements on DeFi protocols. The briefing doc says that the bill intends to, quote, fight the rise in crypto facilitated crime and close off avenues for the evasion of money laundering and sanctions measures that are critical to our national security. Will, first of all, I love the name of this bill. But is this possible? Tell me what you think when you read about this bipartisan Senate bill.
I don't know. I think this was going to happen at some point. Like the rise of DeFi protocols that actually function are pretty terrifying to any sort of financial establishment, right? The fact that I can take a stable coin, move it around, earn some yield on it, deposit this, pull out that, it's pretty great, right? Like I don't have to touch a bank account if I'm into the system. Now, the trouble part is like getting into the system is really hard. Going from crypto to cash or cash into crypto is extremely difficult. There's tons of companies trying to solve this. This is like the classic Bitcoin crypto problem. And that's where the government's going to go for, right? Like Zach, you always use this line: if there's going to be a throat to choke, you're going to go for that one. And this is the one they're going for right now. So they're trying to figure out ways of doing this. The thing they identified in here was interesting. It said that maybe the person who builds the front end is the one who has to do the KYC, or maybe the one who launches the protocol itself is the one who has to do KYC. And they went as far in this legislation as to say, maybe people who invest more than a certain amount of money are the ones who have to do the KYC. So at some point, someone's going to be held responsible for how financial laws interact with DeFi. We just don't know who. We don't know where this legislation is going to land. We don't even know if it's going to pass. But at some point, they're going to have to address DeFi. And that's where it gets a little freaky, because there have been a lot of people who have launched DeFi protocols over the last few years, and they're very popular now. And at some point, the government's going to be like, hey, you guys can't just keep doing this. Like, we have financial rules for a reason. Let's get this set up correctly. So for builders in the past, that's a little freaky. And then for builders in the future, it's just awkward right now because you don't know which way this is going to swing. And if for an investor, it's like, well, why would I put more money into DeFi if I have to become a full custodian and KYC provider in the future as well? That's not the business I operate in. So weird legislation, doesn't look very doable, but this is going to happen at some time. So better prepare now. Zach?
I think it just goes to show that a lot of the existing constructs for regulating these financial instruments just don't apply in DeFi, right? And you sort of see that with the thinking. They say, okay, well, in lieu of an actual backstop, anyone who's invested more than 25 million in building the protocol, they're the backstop, right? So they're trying to figure out these ways to apply sort of existing regulatory structures to something that's quite different, right? This intermediary-less finance that you can go online and do all sorts of financial applications on, right? So I think like whether or not this is the one that gets over the line, I kind of doubt it, but it does really show that there's a lot of thinking that still has to go into applying a regulatory structure to DeFi that actually makes sense and just isn't completely nonsense, right? And I think you see that at least sort of an attempt at this based on some of the language that's highlighted in this piece, which I think is really, really interesting because, yeah, the DeFi, the on-chain stuff, that's arguably far more difficult to regulate and figure out for regulators than is the the centralized exchange stuff, the business stuff, the trusted intermediary stuff that, although not perfect, tends to fit decently on those existing entities. So yeah, the DeFi stuff is still a big, huge question as to how that gets regulated in a way that, assuages legitimate concerns about money laundering, terrorist financing and stuff like that without, throwing the baby out along with the bathwater, providing access to all sorts of financial tools and services that a lot of people around the world just don't have access to otherwise. So I think that really is the foundational interesting part of this whole debate. And we're going to see it time and time again as they try to figure this out. Jen, I'm going to toss it your way.
Yeah, I think that this is the conversation starter, right? There's so many other things to figure out in this ecosystem. We have stablecoins, we have CBDCs, we have centralized exchanges. Those all feel like they are a little bit further when we look at how regulators are looking at those different products, at least here in the US. And so I think this is a conversation starter. I think some of the things in here, as you dig a little bit deeper, you'll find that they may be more difficult to implement than maybe the people who wrote this bill can comprehend right now. I don't think any of us really can comprehend how difficult it will be to implement this. There's a quote from the document, it says, if nobody controls the DeFi protocol, then as a backstop, anyone who invests more than $25 million in developing the protocol will be responsible for these obligations. I think that's really interesting because then you look at like, what does investment mean? Are you talking about a VC investment? Are you talking about token holders? Are you talking about investment of time? Like, how do we put a dollar investment on that? And so I think there are a lot of things to figure out here, but I think that it is an interesting starting point, and it's signals that regulators are looking at DeFi and are digging a little bit deeper into it. And we can expect them to be looking at some of these dApps that have founders, that have people who work for them. You know, we know who to contact. I think we can see regulators starting to talk to those people, maybe even starting to come down on them. Wendy, what do you think?
I just think it's kind of embarrassing that they're trying to regulate something they have no idea as to what they're doing, because that's exactly what this bill sounds like, or this proposed bill sounds like. It sounds like a bunch of public servants that are put under pressure. Election season is coming. They're following the grift, and they're just trying to put something out when they have no idea what this stuff is and how it works. It does kind of sound like a direct attack on VCs. And I think what we will see happening, we will continue to see a lot of these VCs move overseas because they don't want to deal with this type of regulation. I feel like the US government, the public servants, have completely fumbled the ball, and they had the opportunity to instill some sort of guidelines in the past, but they failed to do so. And now they're under scrutiny and under a time crunch to do it. So again, this bill probably won't pass. I don't think most people in the government have any idea how this stuff works. And I think it's just a waste of taxpayer time and dollars, as always.
I like the VC angle on that one, Wendy. Good shout. Way to flag that one.